Lights, camera, action. The latest from podnews.net with co-host. Powerful podcast hosting for agencies and brands. Spotify will announce today that the company now lists over 100,000 video podcasts on the platform. The most video shows are produced in the US, Brazil, Mexico, the UK and Germany. In the Philippines, video podcasts account for over half of all podcast consumption. And adding video gets you more listeners who stick around longer, the company says. Spotify doesn't support open video RSS feeds, though, and requires video uploads to be made via Spotify for podcasters, though you no longer need to host your audio podcast with them. 100,000 shows represents less than 2% of Spotify's total podcast catalogue. Meanwhile, YouTube still has to launch their podcast offering outside the US, where they launched in April. The company hasn't completed its RSS ingest trial either, and consumption numbers are low. Meanwhile, YouTube's under fire for what some are calling fraudulent conduct, after Adalytics researchers suggest as much as 80% of YouTube's video ads on third-party sites are hidden and muted. And the Apple Podcasts app has supported video podcasts since 2005, but Transistor's Justin Jackson says it's really hard to find them.
There's no categories for it. It's not on the homepage. There's no visibility that Apple has video podcasts.
He also says in that YouTube video that it requires 2 different feeds to appear in Apple as well. A new podcast app could strip out the ads from podcasts and share the money with creators. Audia is using AI to remove ads from AM/FM radio stations and could offer the same for podcasts too, it says. 2 pieces of research about podcasts in Spain have been released. 97% of listeners say their perception of a brand improves or remains positive when it's advertised in a podcast, according to a new Spanish listener survey by Acast. Acast saw 6 million monthly listens to hosted content in Spain in May. Also, a study by a Spanish university examined 263 original podcasts published last year by Amazon Music, Audible, Kuonda, Evooks, Podimo, Podium Podcast, Sonora and Spotify. The study discovered that 68% of original podcasts from these companies were only available with a paid subscription. Sonora led Spanish podcast production in 2022 with 84 original podcasts. In the UK, Persephonica has announced a new political podcast with George Osborne and Ed Balls. Osborne was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the UK equivalent of a Treasury Secretary. Balls was his opposition opponent. The podcast will start in autumn and comes as The Rest is Politics, also hosted by 2 opposing political figures, continues to ride high in the charts. Podcast Grader is a tool that analyzes the audio quality of your show and uses AI to give more precise recommendations. It says this podcast is perfect. The latest version of podcast app Pocket Casts for Android users adds a Wear OS app for watches. For Pocket Casts Plus subscribers, it allows full playback, including speed control, silent skipping and volume boost. A capable and fully featured podcast app on your watch. We tested it while walking the dog today, and it works great. Need to book a podcast studio near you? There's a new app for that called Book Your Booth. Stand by for action. Anderson Entertainment, run by Thunderbirds creator Jerry Anderson's son, is opening the first custom-built video podcast studio in Slough in England, working with Neil Velio of Podnose Podcasting and Moxie Slough. And the latest version of Hindenburg Pro now includes the option to export a transcript with speaker names. You can find it in the manuscript after right-clicking to export. And in podcast news, My Time Capsule has hit episode 300, a gentle, humorous listen with British comic actor Mike Fenton-Stevens. The 300th edition was recorded in front of a live audience with comedian Dave Gorman. New podcast trailers now has twice as many new trailers in it. It's perfect for discovering your next favourite listen. Keep it in your podcast app for when your listen queue is empty. It's from your friends at Podnews. Popular Australian podcast Basically Besties has joined the Acast Creator Network. RHLSTP with Richard Herring is to go on tour around the UK later this year. New from Serial Productions today, The Retrievals tells the story of one nurse and the voices of Yale Fertility Centre patients to show what happens when one of the most established fertility clinics in the country is held accountable for failing to protect its patients. Better Tomorrow with Hannah Brown is new from Stitcher. New from Stitcher Studios and Lagos Creative and premieres July the 19th. You Feeling This is new this week from James Kim's company Overtones and iHeart. It premiered at Tribeca Audio Festival earlier this month and showcases 10 intimate stories from a diverse group of Los Angeles-based creators. And Richard Wiseman's On Your Mind returns for a new season this week. The show says it's the ultimate guide to the human psyche that dives into how we think, feel, and behave. This podcast is sponsored by Co-Host and Quill. Co-Host's B2B analytics and advanced demographics dive into a listener's workplace, age, gender, income, hobbies, and social media habits. Follow brands like Expedia and PricewaterhouseCoopers who leverage these insights. You can book a demo now at cohostpodcasting.com. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.